By the way, I try to describe myself as a Zennial, the DuckTales Generation, and it seems to be lost somewhere between Gen X and Millennial. I'm neither. I'm DuckTales Generation, for the love of God.
But culture is foundation, right?
It's everything, man. It's the good, it's the bad, it's the why are we doing this? It's the foundation by which everything happens.
Welcome to Altar of the Demo Gods. If you're wondering what advice from two experienced sales engineers sounds like, it's a little like this.
Welcome back to Altar of the Demo Gods. I'm Keith Wilson, joined by my co-host, John Morton. John, how are you doing this evening?
Ahoy, hoy, Keith.
Ahoy, hoy, Mr. Morton. Good to see you.
You know, I answered the phone that way the other day when my mother called, and she said, ahoy-y? What is that? And I'm like, no. Ahoy, hoy. It's my catchphrase. I stole it from Thomas Edison.
One of my favorite things is when an older person will like mispronounce something, or like, especially if it's like in pop culture, and just do it unapologetically. You know, like the Ghost Fellas.
I joined a meeting today, and the guy was talking about Skibidi Riz Ohio toilet, and he's a gray-haired 50-year-old guy, and he's like, my apologies, I was with the interns all morning, and I speak this way now.
Yeah, there's a whole language thing that is I definitely making me feel older now that I have kids and I hear them, and my son was impressed when he found out that I knew what Riz was.
Really? Now you took that from him. He thought he had something over you.
I mean, he's got plenty of other stuff. I'm still not cool. Look at me. I'm wearing a DuckTales shirt.
By the way, I try to describe myself as a Zennial, the DuckTales Generation, and it seems to be lost somewhere between Gen X and Millennial. I'm neither. I'm DuckTales Generation, for the love of God.
Yeah, I was kind of same as you, right? Around the beginning of the millennial.
Yeah. I don't consider myself a millennial or a Gen Xer. Like, Gen X seems old, millennial seems young. DuckTales is perfect.
Yeah, the DuckTales generation. I like that.
It is, man.
Probably also watch, so your afternoons after school were similar to mine. You had Gargoyles, you had Batman, you had
Darkwing Duck.
Darkwing Duck. You had
Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
Yes, that was the other one. Yeah.
Oh my God.
I remember.
Aladdin. There was like this Disney Hour. And there was like these morning shows too, like Shake, Rattle, and Roll. You remember that? Kid had like a robot or something. Maybe it was.
I used to watch Power Rangers in the morning before school.
Power Rangers was on. I could have swore like Dragon Ball Z was on. There used to be something else. I don't know, but there was like a morning cartoon time and an afternoon cartoon time, and that was it. Like, again, descriptive of the time. You can't just go on YouTube and watch cartoons. There was no Cartoon Network. You had to get it in the windows.
Yeah. And what are we describing here, John? Here's the ultimate segue. We're describing culture. And that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. We're going to be talking about sales engineering culture, an organizational culture. John and I have been through a variety of different organizations, all the way from when I was a mechanic working from Honda and John was a submariner. And is that how you say it, submariner?
I say submariner, yes.
Submariner.
Some say submariner, but I say submariner.
Yeah. Yeah. So all the way through the different types of sales and tech organizations that we've been through. So I think it'll be interesting to have a discussion on the different types of cultures, both positive and negative, and even some of the what we might consider more toxic cultures. There were some aspects or positivity that came out of it. Still wouldn't advise them, but we can definitely compare and contrast all those different things. John, let me open by asking you, as a sales leader, how important is building a culture?
Oh man. I honestly can say definitively in my experience, culture is probably the number one thing above anything else. Things matter, right? The product matters. the process matters, but
but culture is foundation, right?
It's everything, man. It's the good, it's the bad, it's the why are we doing this? It's the foundation by which everything happens.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and I mean it has an impact on everything from turnover to cost per sale, even, I would argue, to
retention, how you sell, how you're perceived, how your company's perceived, how you act day to day. I mean, it goes far beyond, like, it's everything. It's all encompassing.
Well, speaking of cultural examples and how your company is perceived, we're just coming off the back end of Black Hat, which is a big security conference from the year. And there were I'm not going to say the company because they've been getting beat up over it, and it's not a cybersecurity thing anyways. But there was a company that made some bad choices. Actually, there were probably a couple companies that made some bad choices with marketing and kind of displayed a culture of ignorance, right, of what they were doing. And that had negative effects on them, right, in terms of different customer relationships that they had may have been broken. Now, I did see that at least the biggest company controversy that came out of that we're not talking about, they did issue an apology, and they took the leader of their marketing team took complete ownership of the situation, apologized, and discussed what they were going to do. I mean, it was a good apology, right? It was kind of a textbook sort of PR apology. But it took that internal culture and put it on display to the world. Whether that's truly their internal culture or not, that's what everybody's thinking now, though.
Right. Yeah, the perception of it was perceived in a particular way. So, yeah, I mean, and as times change, kind of like we're joking about DuckTales and Zennials and what is it now, Gen Alpha? Opinions change, right? So how you are outwardly perceived also impacts how you internally operate, to your exact point, right? So even some snafus like that at a big conference where what may have worked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago is now so opposite of that and so negative, it may impact things that you don't anticipate, like hiring, right? Like retention, to Keith's point. Like culture is critical. So many things we can talk about here, Keith.
Well, I think let's start by talking about what a positive sort of work culture looks like, the more positive aspects of different work cultures. And let's try and tie those things back to the impact that they have on a sales team.
Yeah.
So let's start with, a company that respects mental health and well-being. Mm-hmm. How much better can teams perform? And I wish if I was a better host, I would have actually done research and had data and stuff to pull up this point. But how much more productive is a team that isn't worried about, their job, or isn't worried about getting, abused at work in some way? But, people that, or not even abused at work, but people that have just been working hard and burnt out, if you put an emphasis on mental health, you have a lot less of that, right? Because, go ahead.
A good example might be kind of to highlight what we're saying on target here is, I think one of the coolest things that happened in that same vein, in a positive note, over the past few years that I saw, is organizations, they have a business unit called HR, Human Resources. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, that's always been kind of a negative connotation. I even joke about it entirely too much. But I think the coolest thing that happened in the past few years was the shift to being called, for example, the head of HR became the chief people officer. Yeah. And to your same vein, they're kind of as a chief people officer, they focus on the people, mental health, physical health, more of positive vibes, if you will. I think that was a really cool shift from the strict HR to people officer, right? So a chief people officer helps with culture too, I think. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, they're almost responsible for it. Still, the CEO is still ultimately the one who accepts responsibility for everything. if you're of the extreme ownership belief, but your chief people officer is certainly taking that hit as well, right? If the culture is bad, they need to fix it. That's why a lot of them are there, is to make sure that there's a good culture. And I remember when being a startup, we kind of had, she was like a CFO, COO, also like knew a lot of legal. She wasn't our general counsel, but still knew like a lot of legal and a ton of HR stuff. And she one of the first things she did when she came in is set the culture. Like, she scheduled meetings with different groups, right?
Yeah.
To understand and define our values. What are the company's values? And now everybody has something they can point back to, right? That define how you should work, how people are expected to work, because the culture's already been, they've set that expectation by having these meetings and discussing what it is that everybody does and their attitudes towards different things and what's important to them and what matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, man, it can't be overemphasized enough, because to your point, and you mentioned it earlier, I just want to double tap on this. I think even as a leader and thinking about culture, I know we're talking about chief people officer, but what Keith mentioned resonated with him, because even if you're in a leadership role or you're the opposite, you're on the bottom of the totem pole working your way up, sometimes it's nice to have a recurring meeting to just check in, right? Let's not cross any boundaries, but how you doing, man? How's personal life? What kind of leave do you, paid time off do you have coming up? Where are you at? Those sort of things impact culture. And to Keith's point, he still remembers it. A chief people officer set that standard, that precedent of one-on-ones that are 30 minutes, not necessarily talking about work, but talking about this. So they do have that sort of impact.
Yeah. And I mean, so we define these values as a group. So it's only we're talking about company values, that's just a portion of culture, but it's something I can always point back to as a leader, or whenever I'm doing some sort of new, whenever I want to kick off a new project or try and launch some new product or something like that, I can always point back to the different values you said. And I'm going to give you simple ones that they're no big secret. They're things like impress every customer, right?
Yeah.
So, we have this culture where we want to do whatever we can to impress our customers, which sounds like a pipe dream, which it isn't. I mean, yeah, 100% coverage is impossible, but when everybody's working towards that goal, it's amazing how many customers you can impress. Or, do the right thing. It goes back to our ethics discussion, right? Integrity discussion. Just things like that help shape the culture, help give a guiding star to all these different departments, right? Because I know it's been set in stone with the company values, I don't have to have a meeting with my boss every time I want to kick off something new or I want to do something. I don't need to check with him, right? I can go, do these align to the company values? If I'm unsure, I'll check with him. But as long as they do, I know I'm good to go and I don't have to bother him, which makes me more productive. So that's how that relates back to sales engineering.
Oh, it absolutely does. So he's giving me flashbacks here, man. I know we've had Charles Herring on here, a couple other military guys, but in the Navy, we had 3 core commitments. And I'll never forget, man. And at the time, it feels like you're getting indoctrinated, but they still resonate with me today. They were honor, courage, and commitment. Mm-hmm. And that helped kind of shape the culture of what you were doing. So anytime you were in a situation, ethical dilemma, whatever dilemma, you can reflect back on those core commitments. Honor, courage, and commitment. And to Keith's point, integrity was a big one. In the submarine fleet, we used to go around and we would take logs. It was part of my job, my watch. So even while the boat was moored next to the pier, right, my job was, once you get qualified enough, either you stand topside with a gun and you keep everyone away, or you're down below decks. It was called below decks watch. And your job was to go around and take logs. You have to make sure tanks aren't flooding, the boat's not flooding. And honestly, dude, you could just go take a nap. Who's going to be around? Who's going to know if we called it blazing logs. But honestly, Keith, to your point, culturally, I would think honor, courage, and commitment. If I have the integrity to do the right thing, and even when no one's around, no one's looking.
You're not taking a nap.
I'm not going to take a nap, no matter how tired or how boring or whatever. It was just a part of what I did, and it made everyone better, too. Because that way, if Keith was taking a nap and I was on watch, you could peacefully take a nap because, I'm not blazing off logs, messing up anyways. So the culture even there was very critical. And although it was a little more strict, a little more abrupt.
Because in your situation, people could die, right?
Yeah. Like we lose $1 billion submarine because I was taking a nap.
Yeah.
Oof,
yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah. I mean, but so that's just one aspect of culture, right? There's other aspects that can be positive or negative, and they all honestly come from the top down. I'm wondering, just because I've been with the same organization for quite a while now, is everybody still in this hustle culture thing where it's, you got to work 15 hours a day, every day, 6 to 7 days a week. Otherwise, you're just not doing it right. Is that
I would
still
say
a thing?
they still exist. They definitively still exist. I think, and I'll give a stark example that I can't even validate, but this is what I imagine. If I am selling gas station, energy drinks, we might be in a culture of sell, whatever it takes. Now, hey, if we got any technical sales folks that are selling gas station energy drinks, come correct me. But I think they exist in small sectors, but they are definitely not as much as I'm seeing, at least in the software world, because the dynamics of everything is kind of changing, right? The demographic we're selling to, Keith's point, this conference that happened earlier, if that happened in like the late 80s, gangbusters, man, they might have been selling like crazy. That happens today with the current culture and things like that. Not so much in the world I see. So is it out there? I guarantee it, right? I definitively can tell you there are probably sales teams like that. But I think for the most part, there's a happy medium that's not that.
Yeah. And I feel like maybe this is just me internalizing things because I've always, I always have dealt with things like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. And you feel like if you're not constantly working or moving something forward, then you're lazy, right? And that can be an internal thing that people like me have just had to deal with and learn to work around. Or it can be something that's been instilled in them by the culture, which is probably what happened to me at some point along the way, right?
Yeah.
Is, if you get it beaten into you enough, you should always be working, you should always be working, you should always be working. And that's, as long as you're working hard, you're going to be making money. That's not always true, right?
Yeah.
You have to learn to take a step back, and it doesn't mean being lazy by any means. I still work plenty hard, but I don't kill myself.
I think there's certain aspects of this too. Like, I'm going to put it out there this way, right? Like, I can't remember the cartoon, but it was like the chicken hawk.
Was it?
And he has got like, it wasn't DuckTales, but it was, now it's on my mind. But there's like this more senior chicken hawk, right? And then there's this real junior chicken hawk, and he's like, let me get at him, right? And he's just so anxious to go. And the more senior chicken hawk, he's like a bigger guy. He's like, whoa, calm down there, partner. What I'm trying to say is like culturally when, you're more getting into a new career, and I'm not even going to say younger because that's culturally inappropriate, but you're getting into a new role, maybe in sales, and you're like a BDR and you're go. I genuinely don't care how old you are, your race, your color, your creed. You're just super ambitious. There is a way to weaponize that to the benefit of everyone, where you can take all that positive energy and let me get at them, let me get in there, let me call 800 people today, right? And use that. But as you evolve in your career, you're like, there are people that are going to be like that, and we don't want to turn them away. They're beneficial, right, Keith? We don't want to say no to anybody. How do we put them in the right direction, wind them up and send them out there, let them learn, and then come back? My point is, as you evolve especially in sales, you'll see that they're like real hungry. I will run through walls to get whatever it takes done. And as you evolve in your career, you start to learn part of our culture is if somebody's like that, we don't want to stop them. We want to promote them, right? We want them to do the right thing. We just want to point them in the right direction. Hey, do this right. Go aggressively, young. But I don't know what the chicken hawk guy is.
That takes leadership doing the right thing.
And from a cultural perspective, that exactly, Keith, trying to bring it back there because we don't want to tell them no. We want to support their behavior, but culturally, we don't want them doing the wrong things either.
we also don't want them burning out, right?
Or burning out. Exactly.
Yeah, there's a very negative aspect of hustle culture, and that's burnout. Which, if somebody's burnt out, they're not selling.
Exactly, right. So
they're collecting their base pay from you, and they're probably headed towards a PIP.
So
there's our acronym of the week, PIP. Performance
we will discuss
plan.
PIP. So yeah, as a cultural thing, as a leader, you can hire a bunch of these very hungry people early in their career and have them run through walls and literally just destroy their entire career. Culturally, is that a good thing? No. We want to be able to use them to their benefit, right? And then use them sounds bad too. Use their strengths as an attribute to what we're trying to do, but with some guardrails. Let's show them the right way. And that goes back to culture again, right? Honor, courage, and commitment. Do we want to use this person until, to Keith's point, they're wiped out and they quit? Or do we want to find a better way to do this, have them, expend that energy positively, and then coach them in their career? To me, that's culture, right? Let's not use them up and throw them away. Let's, use that for good and then show them a better way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And it kind of leads to my next question here. And this isn't necessarily just directly a question for you. It's something that we can both discuss. And that's, as a leader, what are some things you can do to foster a positive culture, a positive work environment?
Yeah.
I'll start with mine so you have a chance to think about it. Something that I do, and I really don't even have technically any direct reports. I have people that do work for me, but they don't necessarily report directly to me. I got to write a book on this, and I'm sure there's probably already books, but it's, essentially leading from the side, like leading with zero authority over people. But anyway, something that I do to help foster a positive culture with the people that do work for me, particularly the younger ones that are new to the workforce and starting a new career. I do one-on-ones, and the one-on-ones aren't just we will talk. We will have a status update, quickly in the beginning, but that usually only takes like 5 to 10 minutes, and then the rest of the 30 plus minutes, we do a coaching session where I coach them and help them solve their own problems and figure out, what they're good at, what they like to do, and what's valuable to the company, and try and figure where that all intersects. And I do that through these one-on-ones. That helps foster a culture of people that are really happy and appreciative, right? Of being able to do things that they love, that are valuable to the company, and that they're good at. Is certainly helpful. And it, again, building this strong culture has all of these benefits, like, longer retention. I've seen the company I work at now, just because the culture, at least from what I've seen, is so well established, we don't have a high turnover rate. It's not very, very high at all. So that's just one positive impact of culture. And that's one thing that I personally do to help try and foster that culture. John, what's something that you do as a sales leader to help?
Yeah. So again, it's conflicting for me, because anybody who will come on here with any sort of military acumen, we learn the opposite of what I'm about to tell you. But because that world, you can rule with more of an iron fist. So on this side of the fence, corporate America, whatever you want to call it, not the military. One thing I like to do, and everyone loves, I get tons of praise from it, especially from our chief people officers, HR folks, is praise in public, punish in private. If somebody does something good, I like to take the largest audience I can and reward them for that. Opposite of that, if they do...
When you say punish, you're talking about you're having a respectful conversation with them to...
a calibration or a coaching opportunity is what I mean by punishment, where you did something that was wrong. If it was egregious, that's going to go to the chief people officer. But if it's some coaching, coaching or calibration.
If it's a performance problem, sure. If it's a legal or sexual harassment problem or something like that,
I can't help you there.
It's to HR you go.
But if it's coaching, like, you got too excited, you drank a little too much, whatever it may be, you said too much, That's where I like to, punish them in private. And that's just a phrase, the catchy phrase I like to say, praise in public, punish in private. But I think that makes sense. And it goes hand in hand with both also sharing in success and failure. I like to tell people when I failed, I'm not an ivory tower of everything either, right? So I like to share success and failure. So they kind of go hand in hand, right? So those are two things I like to do to shift culture. And definitively, I can tell you, people that I've coached in private to help them, to Keith's point, with like a PIP, nobody wants to talk about how I got to put on a process improvement plan. So we can do some coaching there in private. But any praise I like to do in public. And then, sure, success and failure. So people know we're humans too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say another thing that, like a lot of the stuff that I do, that it comes from the top down too. It's not, when I say I do this thing, I'm not the only one in the company that does these things, right? It's just because we have this top down culture, it encourages me to do these things. So another thing that I like to do is encourage dissension with things that I'm doing or planning. I like to encourage people that I work with, that I respect, to give me feedback, and like critical feedback. Don't just rubber stamp everything. I've literally said in meetings, like, I'm not going to move off of this subject until somebody disagrees with me. Right? Because I can't be right all the time. That's just not possible.
Right.
I'm a human, and I've been doing the same thing for a while. I'm going to make mistakes. I could get tunnel vision. I could have biases. I could have all sorts of stuff. But that, by encouraging that sort of dissension, does a couple things. One, it tells people that I don't have an ego. So if they see something wrong, they can come to me and say, hey, Keith, this doesn't look right. And it helps me because I actually get this outside feedback that I wouldn't get otherwise, because I have plenty of blind spots, right? Yeah. And just telling people that I'm infallible, right? Just like you, just like everybody else, everybody makes mistakes, or makes bad decisions, or hasn't thoroughly thought through something. So pushback's okay. Like, accept criticism, I think is the best way to do, because I've worked for people before that cannot accept criticism.
Right. Oh man, that drives me the craziest. And being in the submarine fleet, that was the one thing we always talked about, is being open to criticism and always being open-minded. Man, you have to be learning. So I got to tell you, Keith, I know we're getting up on time, close here, but people always tell me, they're like, John, please don't stop with the coaching. Please don't stop with the coaching, right? Because they like that critical feedback. And in all reality, I have to be extremely careful to not do the real coaching I want. So I got this very fine balance of feedback, because I feel like if I unleashed the beast, the Kraken was out and gave you some real coaching, you might quit. So even understanding that, right? Like, even though people are asking, don't hold back. You still got to think it through. But everyone I've ever talked to.
Well, there's certainly a way to be respectful, right? Like, I create, I create courses for a living. That's one of the main things that I do. Or at least I supervise the creation of courses, right, through contractors or employees. And we get feedback on all those courses, and people say critical things, and they say it nicely, and they say critical things that are nasty. And they say critical things that are just plain weird and stupid too, where you're just like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But
in that same vein, man, last piece.
But so I was just going to say, like, those are all strangers, right? So those are anonymous surveys. Well, not anonymous really, but they're surveys that somebody fills out on the internet. And because of that, they're not going to hurt my feelings, because I don't know who they are. So I can't gauge whether I should respect that or not. But I can take feedback. I've even taken nasty things, and I'm like, you know what? They do have a point. Like, maybe they said it a little, in a crappy way, but they do have a point, and that's something I can fix.
I'll leave it with this, man. I probably, this is the for me. The good way I measure culture is that feedback, right? And so we had this saying in the Navy, the right person for the job. And literally we meant that. Again, doesn't matter, color, creed, age, whatever. But if somebody tells you, and not just somebody, but there's conclusive, relevant evidence that you are not the right person for the job, and you can accept that bad news in a way that you understand it, that doesn't hurt your feelings, to me, that's a positive culture. I know that's like master's degree level, doctorate level of understanding of what we're saying with culture, but if you can take bad news and you're not genuinely offended or hurt by it, to me, that's a good indicator of a positive culture, right? Someone's trying to help you and you can interpret that the right way. So,
and that kind of rolls into another kind of topic I wanted to talk about a little bit around culture, and that's, measuring the culture impact. So you gave one sort of measurement, but you can look at other measurements too, of like a positive culture is going to lead to a longer retention rate. Maybe not necessarily in sales, because sales, you have to keep up certain performance numbers, or you get let go. But what I'm saying is, like, the good ones are going to want to stick around because you have such a good positive culture. Right. So you got things to measure it, like retention rate. You can also, you can survey your employees. You can.
Yeah. Those are routine things we do. Every company I've been at surveys.
Yeah. And it's, so what I want to add, because I've been at multiple companies, and they all do surveys. I've only been at a handful where they actually address what was said in the surveys in a public forum. And where the CEO gets on and says, you know what, we conducted these surveys and we looked, and here were a lot of the things that we were doing well that people like, and we're going to keep working on those and keep doing that. And here are the things that we're not doing so well, and here are our plans to rectify these things, and actually put metrics and things behind it, like turn it into action. Because if I'm just filling in a survey and nothing ever happens, I'm going to stop filling in the survey.
And you're going to be accountable because all they remember is the negative. To Keith's point, although they're trying to be anonymized in a small enough sample set, configured.
It's hard to be anonymous with stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
All right, John. So this is the part where we kind of summarize and talk main points of this episode. This is an interesting one. Culture is a huge discussion that goes beyond anything that we could cover in this 30-minute episode. But there are positive things that you as a leader or just as an individual can do to help positively impact the culture, make it a better place where you work. And if it is a negative, toxic culture, I'm telling you, look for somewhere else, because we've been in there before. I know both John and I have been in toxic sales cultures before. It's not worth it. Like, yeah, you probably make decent money, and that's because they have to keep paying good money to keep people. So, look for a place that has a positive culture. Find ways that you can contribute to that positive culture, whether that's through being open, accepting criticism, putting the business first. And when I say that, I'm not saying kill yourself for the business. I'm saying drop the ego and put what's going to be best for the business first, right? And in terms of the decisions that you make. And then also it's important to set a standard from the top down of what values your company has as part of your culture, because it's the guiding light for all of your department heads and individuals. So, it's if you as an individual understand what your company values as part of their culture, it makes it much easier to contribute to that culture. John, what do you got?
I still am a fan of, and I'm changing the wording because of you, Keith. Praise in public, coach/calibrate in private. If you can do those things, right, that's a positive spin on culture. And what's funny about it is it's organic. Anybody can do it. Like even the lowest individual in the org, an intern who's there for 1 month, can do that. That's a big one. And yeah, always be open to feedback and always know, you don't have all the answers, right? So like, I like the right person, for the job means, am I always listening to what's being said, and am I trying to be a positive force for the culture, right? So,
well, thanks, John. This was a fun episode. Like I said, culture is such a big topic that has so much you can go into. I'm sure we will revisit this at some point in another episode, just because there is so much more and how it ties together with different things as well. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, subscribe, leave us a comment. tell your friends about us, right? Spread the word about Alter the Demo Gods. You can get us wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. If you need links to all of that, you can go to our website, demogodspod.com. That's demogodspod.com. If you have questions for us or think you'd be a good guest on the show, you can email us at demogodspod@gmail.com. That's demogodspod@gmail.com. And what are we talking about next week, John? Let me take a look here. Next week, we're going to be talking about effective documentation strategies for sales engineers, which is interesting because John and I had a conversation about this earlier today. So if that interests you, we'll see you here next week on Alter of the Demo Gods.